Okay, so we're back. And memory, right? Is that what we were talking about? With every year that goes by, we memories change, and how we remember what we remember changes. Um, and memory is a creative act. There are a couple stories that we didn't do this semester that I often do, and one of them has a great line that goes something like, um, memory is not so much a process of remembering, but about forgetting, and things that you don't remember, things that you misremember. Remember, memory is in many ways, a creative act. And what we choose to remember and how we remember it is, in a way, how we sculpt a story about ourselves, our own narrative, and how you put it together. So one of our characters here, Twyla, does not remember Maggie being black, does not remember kicking her. Roberta does remember that happening, and then they see each other years later again, and then one can't remember. We're going to look at the ending there a little more closely as well. But think about memory, and every time you call up a memory, you call it up just a little differently, and then you put it back, and you put it back a little differently. And when you call it up again, another detail may have shifted. And if you ever see anybody, most of you are a little young for this, but you see somebody, say you went to high school with, and 15 years have gone by. If it's 5 years, not so much, but 15 years go by. By the way, go to your high school reunions. I've been to, I think we've had 4, all of my high school reunions, and they're great fun. I really don't stay that long. A lot of my close friends have moved far away and don't go to these things, but they're a lot of fun to see how people turned out and what you remember, and stuff they remember about you. And my high school classmates who I see now, I think the last reunion was a 30-year, they all said, "You haven't changed at all." Well, I guess that's good. I'll take that, better than changing for the worse. But anyway, they'll come up and say, "Oh, you know what, I remember that day," or "I remember you," and I have no memory of it. Now, once they start describing it, it comes back to me. And of course I say things to them, "You always wore those blue sneakers," and I'd look at those in class, and they're like, "Blue sneakers, what?" And what we remember really says a lot about us and how we remember it. Think of the stories you play over and over in your head. We are a collection of stories, right? We're all a literature anthology. We're all a collection of poems and stories and of the play of our lives. And every time you call one up, every time you tell a story from your life, you tell it a certain way depending on who you're talking to, and that changes the way you remember it. So think about this as you age. Maybe if you're sitting there and you're 18 years old, the concept of remembering things, you probably still think of it as you remember facts, and you try to remember facts. But as time goes on, it's very, very funny how you call things up. And we're not computer hard drives, and even those are not that reliable. Roberta looked up from her salad and stared at me. "Maggie didn't fall," she said. "Yes, she did. You don't remember." "No, Twyla, they knocked her down. Those girls pushed her down and tore her clothes in the orchard." "I don't. That's not what happened." "Sure it is. In the orchard. Remember how scared we were?" "Wait a minute. I don't remember any of that." "And Bozo was fired?" "You're crazy. She was there when I left. You left before me. I went back. You weren't there when they fired Bozo." So they're combining time periods. Roberta messed up, and then when they get done with this conversation, and this is the one after they're shopping together. So this is before the busing fight, but this is when they bump into each other at the supermarket. And your mother this and your mother that, did she ever get well? They end up sort of saying snarky things about each of their moms. And Twyla says, "She smiled a tiny sad smile." "No, she never did. Look, call me, okay?" "Okay," I said, but I knew I wouldn't call. Roberta had messed up my past somehow with that business about Maggie. I wouldn't forget a thing like that. Would I? She messed up her past, right? We have our past in a certain way that we like it, right? A certain way we have it arranged, like you arrange books on a shelf, shoes in your closet. You have your history arranged in your head, and then someone comes along and remembers it differently, and it messes up the whole arrangement. This happens, people. It happens more and more the older you get. Then we get into the busing, and they have those picket signs, and the picket signs start to talk to each other. No one understands what they say. That's kind of funny. All right, then the sort of final Christmas scene. And Twyla, we decided not to have a tree, and then they end up going out for a tree on Christmas Eve, and she comes across Roberta, who's coming out of some fancy party because her husband is very wealthy and works at IBM. Now, IBM still has a small presence in the Hudson Valley, I think, but in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, if you worked at IBM, that was a good job, even if you were the janitor. They made just so much money in the computer industry, and then it all kind of fell apart. But it was a huge part of the mid-Hudson Valley economy. IBM, you guys might not have even heard of IBM, but it was the computer company in America. So that's where Roberta's husband works. So they have this interesting conversation. Twyla, Roberta says, there she was in a silvery evening gown and dark fur coat. A man and another woman were with her, the man fumbling for change to put in the cigarette machine. The woman was humming and tapping on the counter with her fingernails. They all looked a little bit drunk. Well, it's you. How are you? I shrugged. Pretty good, frazzled, Christmas and all. Regular? Called the woman from the counter. She's getting a coffee. Fine, Roberta called back, and then, wait for me at the car. She slipped into the booth beside me. I have to tell you something, Twyla. I made up my mind if I ever saw you again, I'd tell you. I just as soon not hear anything, Roberta. It doesn't matter now anyway. It does. How you remember stuff matters. It's how we make up the literature anthology of our lives. We write the story of our history. No, she said, not about that. Don't be long, said the woman. She carried 2 regulars to go, and the man peeled his cigarette back as they left. It's about St. Bonnie's and Maggie. Oh, please. Listen to me. Now, this is Roberta talking to Twyla. Listen to me. I really did think she was black. I didn't make that up. I really thought so. But now I can't be sure. I just remember her as old, so old, and because she couldn't talk, well, you know, I thought she was crazy. She'd been brought up in an institution like my mother was, and like I thought I would be too, and you were right. We didn't kick her. It was the gargoyles. Only them, but well, I wanted to. I really wanted them to hurt her. I said we did it too, you and me, but that's not true, and I don't want you to carry that around. It was just that I wanted to do it so bad that day. Wanting to is doing it. So Roberta wasn't lying to her years ago when she told her about Maggie. Maggie's black and we kicked her, you kicked her. She's just like, you know, she changes her story. She goes back and thinks, wait a minute, no. That's just, I wanted to kick her because she reminded me of my mother and my life, and you know, kicking Maggie would be like kicking herself, and but still we don't know who's white and who's black. But so it's Roberta's memory, and she was so certain before, and believe me, sometimes the more certain someone is about a memory, the more likely it is it's a little off. So yeah, her eyes were watery from the drinks she had, I guess. I know. It's that way with me. One glass of wine and I start bawling over the littlest things. We were kids, Roberta. Yeah, I know, just kids. 8. Yeah, lonely, scared too. She wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand and smiled. Well, that's all I wanted to say. I nodded and couldn't think of any way to fill the silence that went from the diner past the paper bells on out into the snow. It was heavy snow, I thought. I'd better wait for the sand trucks before starting home. Thanks, Roberta. Sure. Did I tell you my mother, she never did stop dancing? Yes, you told me. In mine, she never got well. Roberta lifted her hands from the tabletop and covered her face with her palms. Well, she took them away, really, really crying. Oh, shit, Twyla, shit. What the hell happened to Maggie? So, people coming to grips with their past here. You know, Roberta identifies to this day with Maggie. A lifelong institutionalized person, couldn't speak, Roberta's rich. She has a chauffeur and 2 servants. That's 2 more servants than I'll ever have, and 1 more chauffeur than I'll ever have. But yet she still identifies with Maggie, even though her life is as far from that as it could be. She can't leave it behind, right? Where's Maggie? She's obsessed with Maggie. Maybe Roberta recognizes she could have easily become Maggie if life had taken a couple different turns. So, the past is always with us. It's that great Gatsby story all over again. Gatsby thinks he can make up a new past and create his future differently. But the past is always with us, and you can't leave stuff behind. You can deal with it. You can come to terms with it. It's not a life sentence, but the past is always with you. And this story certainly proves that. And the story is about how we shape our memories in order to suit our own psyches, our own psychology. So we might not be a creative act consciously, but we create memories and recreate them in a way to help us deal with the past, which is a way to help us move forward. Ultimately, I think the story has a happy ending. 2 kids, 8-year-olds in an orphanage, and one has a wonderful family with 4 kids. The other one's a stepmom, marries a nice guy. Their marriages are in good shape. Families are in good shape. They did all right. But you can't leave stuff from your childhood behind. It's always with you. It's always going to shape you right up to the grave. But how you shape it in your head is very, very important. So always remember that, or misremember it, but remember it the best way for it to suit you.